Hi, my name is Tim Rains. I'm a group product manager in the Trustworthy Computing group at Microsoft. With me today is the general manager of the Microsoft Protection Center, Vinny Galato. Vinny has over 10 years of experience in the antivirus industry. During that time, he's managed the antivirus labs at both McAfee and Symantec. Vinny has spent the last few years building the Microsoft Malware Protection Center here at Microsoft into the world-class antivirus lab that powers the forefront line of products: Windows Live OneCare, Windows Defender, the malicious software removal tool. Vinny, welcome.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Today we are discussing the latest version of the Microsoft Security Intelligence Report, which is Volume 6, also known as SIR V6. We release this report twice a year, focusing on the trends Microsoft sees in vulnerability disclosures, vulnerability exploits, privacy breaches, spam and phishing, and of course malware and potentially unwanted software. This version of the SIR focuses on the second half of 2008, but includes trends from a period of years. Vinny, can you give us a quick rundown of the content that's included in SIR V6?
Well, there's a lot. As you mentioned, the report covers for the second half of 2008. It includes data and trends for lots of different threats: software vulnerability disclosures, software vulnerability exploits, browser-based exploits, security breaches around privacy, malicious software, potentially unwanted software, email and spam and phishing threats, big again. Focused this time specifically on rogue security software and malware-hosted analysis. We use third-party data for much of it, but in many cases, most of the data comes from the vast telemetry that we've built into our products and services that customers opt into, because they want to tell us about this, right? In the end, we get hundreds of millions of systems reporting back to us from some of the internet's busiest services. This gives us a unique insight to the threat landscape.
Wow, hundreds of millions of systems? That's impressive. Tell me more how your lab manages to do this.
Well, our focus is around protection, response, and advising. Specifically, those three pillars we've now built the security services that we offer for the Microsoft customers on.
So let's discuss rogue security software for a minute. This was a major issue in 2008, and it seems to be growing. These are programs that masquerade as legitimate security programs offering protection from malware, spyware, and other threats, but actually use social engineering to obtain money from victims while offering little or no real protection. Typically, rogue security programs display false or misleading alerts about infections or vulnerabilities on the victim's computer and offers to fix the supposed problems for a price. What can you tell us about the trend here, Vinny?
Well, rogues have been growing in prevalence for the past 18 months, really spiking in the second half of 2008. 3 of the top 10 threats detected worldwide in the second half of 2008 are rogue security software. That's pretty big, actually, or the downloaders that are used for the purpose. We provide an additional level of data in 12 countries on the SIR. In 9 of those countries, rogue security software accounts for at least 3 of the top 10 threats detected, and is usually the number 1 or 2 threat.
Wow. So what guidance can you give people to help avoid this type of threat?
Well, I think it's important to make sure that you understand, of course, what you're installing on your machine, and really only install antivirus and security software that comes from a trusted source, like Microsoft. Be very wary of warnings that suddenly appear on your machine saying that your machine is infected and that you need to do something about it, because it's usually not true.
Wow. Vinny, what does the SIR tell us about software vulnerability disclosures in the second half of 2008?
Well, I want to make a point up front that, of course, the numbers that are in the report are industry-wide, so they're not just software from Microsoft or the vulnerabilities within Microsoft software. And so these disclosures declined by about 3% compared to the first half of 2008, and we're down 12% year on year from 2007. So a decline continues. High-severity vulnerabilities increased, though, in 2008, or at least in the second half compared to the first half of 2007. And high-severity vulnerabilities are becoming a bigger percentage of the vulnerabilities disclosed. It's a bad combination of growing proportion of threats, which also require only a low complexity to be really exploited. Only 8% of the vulnerabilities, however, disclosed in the second half of 2008 were in operating systems. 4.5% were in browsers, and 86% or so were in applications or other software. That's big, right? And that's where the threats are going. Computer users need to make sure all software is up to date. Use Microsoft Update for us, in getting things, up to date and current, and then check third-party software updates regularly, and that will help.
What percent of all these vulnerability disclosures across the entire software industry are vulnerability disclosures in Microsoft products?
Microsoft's share of the total number of disclosures remains very low. For the past 5 years, it's accounted for about 3 to 5% of the total disclosed vulnerabilities across the industry.
Wow. Survey 6 also contains data on the browser-based exploits we see happen on the internet. Are there regions of the world where these attacks occur more often than others?
Yeah, more of the attacks happen against the systems where the locale is set, the United States or China, reflecting really where the bad guys are targeting their efforts these days. Of course, the world's largest economy and a key growing market. Now, it's important again to note the number of other attacks, and this is a problem everywhere where your browser's not patched, and it's important to patch your browsers.
Do you see differences in these attacks on different operating systems?
We do. Looking at the browser-based applications attacked on XP and Windows Vista, machines show a dramatic difference. These patterns are very similar to the last SIR. Now, we think the design improvements in Vista and newer Microsoft software makes it harder for the bad guys to exploit, so they're increasingly focused on third-party applications. It's important to keep all your software up to date.
Looking at MSRT data by operating system worldwide, it looks like there are real differences in the number of systems that the malicious software removal tool finds are infected with malware. What can you tell us about the data, Vinny?
Well, Windows Vista is significantly better than XP at any service pack level. Comparing the latest service pack level of each OS, what we find is this. The infection rate of Windows Vista SP is 60% lower than XP Service Pack 3. With no installed service pack, the infection rate of Windows Vista is 89% lower than that of Windows XP. 64-bit editions of both XP and Vista were both better than the 32-bit versions. Server editions of the software are less infected than the client editions. The general trend we have seen for quite some time is that for each edition of the software, the higher the service pack level, the lower the rate of infection.
You tend to find different regions of the world have different infection rates. What can you tell us about this for the second half of 2008?
We use a measure called CCM that looks at the number of infected systems for every 1,000 executions of the Microsoft Malicious Software Removal Tool, also known as MSRT. A lower number is better. In the second half of 2008, we found that on average, for every 1,000 executions of this tool, 8.6 systems were infected with malware. Japan, for an example, continues to have the lowest rate with 1.7 infected machines for every 1,000 executions. Some high infected countries include Serbia and Montenegro with a 77 CCM, Brazil with the 20.9 CCM, and Spain with a 19.2 CCM. The States, to contrast, has a CCM of 9.1. There's lots more geographical data in the full report. We focus on data from more than a dozen countries worldwide, including the States, of course, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia. Download the full report and find out what your country's CCM is.
Wow, interesting stuff. Well, sometimes I get questions about the difference between malware observed in enterprise environments versus what we see home systems infected with. It looks like you've captured that data here in Survey 6. What can you tell us about it?
Well, what we could tell you about it is that it's pretty typical for a long, long time, right? The infections and the types of threats in the enterprise is usually different than what we find at home. Those machines in the enterprise environment running forefront were likely to encounter a worm versus something else. Computers at home running live OneCare were typically seeing something like a Trojan or, again, this rogue security software, which has continually become a problem, as well as downloaders and droppers and adware and other exploits.
This slide shows us how the different categories of malware have been trending over the past couple of years. Is there anything significant you'd like to point out?
Well, the rise in miscellaneous Trojans was driven by the prevalence, again, around this rogue security software like fake XPA and fake SecSen, both in the top 10 of detections worldwide for the second half of 2008, both detected on way more than 1 million systems worldwide. Neither threat was in the top 25 for the first half of 2008, so a huge rise and a very big difference there. Note, this chart does not show the number of threats going down. They're increasing. They will continue to increase. Again, vigilance is key. Update your machines. It just simply shows a change in the mix of threats over time. Viruses, spyware, and backdoors continue to decline, and I think that's natural, and we're going to see that happening for quite some time.
Well, that was a great overview of some of the key data in the latest survey, Vinny. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
There's plenty of other data in the report we didn't get a chance to touch on. Things like Office PDF file format attacks, spam and phishing trends, the geographies where malware and phishing are hosted from, including a deep dive state by state in the United States, and information on rogue security software, of course. Also included in the report are strategies, mitigations, countermeasures that could help you manage your environment in a way that's more efficient given the way we see the threat landscape changing. The full report and a shorter key findings summary are available for download at www.microsoft.com/SIR.